So you've just taken delivery of your new generator, and one of the first things we're going to do is take the keys, open up the canopy and take a look at what's inside. Opening up the generator on this side, you'll see that we have the control panel located on the right hand side, the e-stop, the output AC protection breaker and some other various systems that are included within the generator that allow it to operate safely. Today what we're going to do is walk through the safety checks prior to starting your new generator and some of the simple steps that you can take to make sure it operates efficiently. One of the first things we're going to do once you've located your generator in a correct position and connected the output cables and AC input if it's required is connect the DC battery terminals on this side behind this door. That can be done by simply opening up these doors and identifying the negative battery cable which goes on the negative side, which is imprinted on the battery, and putting it on. And also connecting the positive battery terminal, which is located on the right hand side, to the positive point. These will then need to be tightened up with a 13mm spanner to ensure that the connections are tight and secure for operation. Okay, so now we've connected the DC battery terminals to the generator. We're going to run through some basic pre-start checks to make sure the generator is ready for operation. One of the key things to check when operating a generator is fluid levels. Now that can be the wet cells on a lead acid battery if you have one. On this particular machine, it's a gel battery which is sealed. It's the coolant level located within the header tank of the machine and also the oil level within the sump of the engine, which can be checked via a dipstick. Checking these levels and making sure they're at the correct operation points is vital to making sure that the machine stays healthy and within its safe operating parameters. It does have a certain level of protection and shutdowns built into the control panel, but it's also best to check that the levels are correct and in the correct level positions rather than relying on the control system to tell you that they're not and there's something potentially wrong with the machine. So once you're happy that all your fluid levels are correct and in the safe operating parameters of the machine, we're going to use the panel key located on the side of the panel to check all the DC and AC connections located within the control panel and ensure that these are nice and tight and not going to come loose during operation. Once you've completed that and you're happy, we're going to make sure that the e-stop is removed from the machine. We're going to press a button to wake the panel up and we're going to make sure the output breaker is in the off position to make sure we don't liven up the cables immediately once we've started the machine. One best practice to carry out is to take off the small screw on the side of the fuel pump, like so, and just give the machine 3, 4 or maybe even 5 pumps on the fuel pump just to bring the fuel up from the belly tank to the side of the fuel pump for injection purposes, because what happens sometimes during transport is the fuel runs back to the tank and it can take 2 or 3 cranks for it to pull the fuel back up to the top of the engine for it to fire. Now that we've got the control panel on, we're just going to run through it and make sure, using the OK button, that we've got no alarms present and the machine is ready for operation. Because of the type of machine this is, and it's a standalone machine, obviously we're in the workshop environment, we're simply just going to press the manual button and run the machine offload for the first time. Now, you will have noticed during that initial startup that the engine was slightly hunting. It's not uncommon for this to happen, and it's sometimes quite often a phone call that we'll get from customers saying the engine's unstable once I initially start it. The reason for this is because the engine is cold. Now, the controller has a built-in idle function which allows the engine to slightly rev above higher and a little bit lower than its set parameter of 1500 RPM to generate some extra heat within the engine, but it's nothing to be concerned about. And as you'll see once I start it again in a minute, that hunting eventually stops and the engine RPM becomes stable. So from simply just starting the engine and carrying through some basic checks, one of the key things to do now before placing the machine into operation is just verify your emergency stop is operational before you actually energise the LV circuit breaker. So all I'm going to do in this next test is start the machine in manual again and simply activate the emergency stop to make sure the machine stops when it's requested to. And as you can see, the e-stop activated it, shut down and worked as expected. So by simply removing the e-stop, stopping the machine and pressing the reset button, we can remove that e-stop latched fault from the control panel and place the machine back into operation. The next thing that we would do in a scenario of completing an installation is simply start the machine up and then close the LV breaker as so. More often than not, clients will sometimes phone up asking why the generator is not producing any voltage or giving them any output to the load, and the reason for this normally is because this breaker's tripped. It's important to have your generator installed by a competent electrician and to ensure all the current breaker settings are set to the exact parameters of your output cables when installed. If the machine is going into a standby application, it is also vital that you ensure that the AC supply feeding the machine is of the correct size, correctly protected and capable of supplying the engine heater and battery charger with the required current for safe operation.